It is a very timely discussion, of course, having in mind a couple of announcements made by the Commission last week. Just yesterday, Vice President Jourova made an announcement. We have an upcoming vote on the AI Act in the European Parliament next week. So indeed is the moment to discuss these developments. But maybe before I give you my thoughts, I would also like to engage a little bit with the audience with two questions which can help me make perhaps my first point that I want to share with you. I was wondering, I mean, I usually know that we are the ones here on the panel that should get the question, but it would be very helpful if you kind of raise your hand to say how many of you believe that generated content, such as deep fake of a politician making a fake major announcement, or his voice is faked, or his electoral campaign is faked, should be labeled. How many of you think that deepfake has to be labeled when it comes to political? Okay, so quite many of you. But then my second question is how many of you believe that every special effect, like in a movie, for example, should be labeled as a deepfake? Okay, no one actually. So there's one person. The reason why I ask you this is because this exemplifies my first point. I think our approach as regulators has to be targeted when it comes to generative AI. We see a very rapid development of generative AI. There is indeed a lot of excitement, but it causes also a lot of concerns amongst society. And I would say for good reason, definitely. But in this case, it actually strengthens the political will to act on that topic. As regulators and legislators, we need to address this massive potential for disinformation that is out there and the way it can spread and the way it can be produced. Well, many of you would say we've had the disinformation discussion already previous times, but just imagine a Kremlin troll farm that could no longer need to find someone who's fluent in English or in another major language, but could use simply generative AI to spell fake news. So there is clear need to act from the perspective that I come from in the European Parliament. But what I advocate is for instead of us to play whack-a-mole and to try to regulate the next big thing, we should aim for an underlying set of principles and mechanisms that are effective, at least for the next few years to come. In our latest Parliament version of the AI Act, which is, as I said, due to be voted next week, we indeed address the point on generative AI. We do so in few ways. One is by bringing more transparency requirements, such as labeling of deep fakes and the need to notify users whenever they're interacting with an AI system. We also have introduced the first ever rules on foundational models like ChatGPT, BART, and other powerful models. But again, my underlying view of how I look at these things is to be very targeted. Then I need to bring two more points, but to make the discussion more interactive and to help Jen here, as we've been to a number of panels together on that topic, maybe I can bring my 2 points at a later stage.
Okay, well, I think you certainly, that was very illustrative, that show of hands. Gabriele, we're going to talk about what's the Commission's thinking, but I think Eva rather neatly demonstrated why most people seem to be more in favour of a risk-based approach. So take us through that.
Yeah, thank you indeed. I think now it's time for more the Parliament and the Council to speak rather than the Commission. The Commission has, of course, presented this proposal quite some time ago, way before ChatGPT was there. So I think what I would like to do now at this stage is perhaps indeed more to if I may rewind back a bit to what was the Commission thinking already, in 2021, and see what elements indeed are there that today we can actually use. And indeed, the debate in the Parliament specifically right now is demonstrating indeed that there are elements of the Commission proposal that can be leveraged. So first of all, I would say the definition of AI. What the Commission did at the time was inspiring itself from the definition of AI coming from the OECD. The OECD principles were adopted in 2019. And that definition was the basis of our proposal with some tweaks. And I would say a couple of tweaks are more technical in nature, but one I would say is particularly relevant today, which is the element of content. So the OECD definition refers to a system that can make decisions, predictions, and recommendations. And we added that can generate outputs such as content, for instance. Indeed, so you may have content like ChatGPT generates text. Like if I want to have a draft or an email, it generates text. It's not necessarily a recommendation, a prediction, or a decision. So already at the time, I think we wanted to make sure that there is no doubt that generative AI, strictly speaking, today is AI. And then, indeed, we foresaw two other points which were mentioned by Ms. Maydell in Article 52, the transparency. So the first one was about systems that are intended to interact with natural persons. Here, we've foreseen a transparency obligation, so meaning that there should be an obligation to inform the people that they're interacting with a machine and not with another human being, even if that machine is actually really articulate, really, can really make us think I'm interacting with another human being. And if you see the recitals, you see there indeed that we made the reference to essentially the risk of impersonation or deception. There is also an issue there about fundamental human dignity. So we need to know if we are interacting with a machine or a human, because indeed we are human, we are supposed to be courteous and nice to humans, but a machine remains a machine, which is, by the way, one of the reasons why the Commission chose to use a product legislation, because we wanted also to signal that AI is an artifact, it's a product. And then, indeed, we also foresaw another transparency obligation when it comes to content generated by AI. So notably when it comes to audio, video, and sound generated by AI, so deepfakes, we have foreseen an obligation to ensure that people are informed that that content is synthetic, so is not authentic, with some exceptions, but no time now to go into too many technical details.
Well, thank you very much for bringing us up to speed again. As you say, it's been a long time in the making, this AI Act. Claudio, I was going to ask you what you found most exciting or most worrying about generative AI, but since you were the only person who raised your hand for labelling, I feel I need you to explain, well, what do you want to see? Is this about honouring the creator of these 3D effects, or were you just being provocative?
I was a bit provocative, obviously, but the reality is also that we need to be very conscious about what we do with generative AI and how we explain it to people. That's what we try to do as well in our little world with the company I'm running. The companies are now delegating responsibility on AI, or especially generative AI, to consumers, to users. So what company, not all of them, the majority of companies should also intervene within ethics and trustworthy AI and explain how to use it and what it is. So we are happy that the European Parliament and the Commission is intervening, because obviously that's your role. And the companies are more and more, as I said before, delegating to users. They're just trying to look at what this does for you, look how you can use it, instead of really talking as well about how to use it. So that's why I was provocative. And I think that everything you're going to see very soon, or already now, in videos and in content, digital content, can be seen as fake by definition, because you don't know anymore. So it's going to be labeled. I think it's very important to label it as a fake. So, this started already. Well, it take me a bit by surprise. But this is really what we do at A-dapt. So A-dapt is a company that Matthew Mays and myself, we founded in 2019. And we created a format called adaptive media, which uses emotion AI to adapt interactive videos to people based upon human factors such as attention, positivity, and self-confidence. What you see here is specifically is our simulator. So we call this interview simulator. And what we do is working in social impact. So this is a specific product we did for Pôle emploi, which is the French governmental agency for employment. On the left side of the screen, you see our actress. She is having a job interview and she is negative. So you can see how the emotion AI that we use is analyzing her emotions. So between the first image and the second image, there is a tutorial with an interactive video where we teach our users how to gain self-confidence, what to say in a job interview, how to be prepared for a job interview. And on the right side, you see the result after 45 minutes of interactive tutorial that we produce. But what is very important here is to know that the emotion AI that we use is not recording, and it's not it's just used as a sensor to capture the emotions. It's working on a device. Our API or our software is a deep neural network compressed in less than 1 megabyte. So it doesn't work on a server, it works on a browser. If I would switch off Wi-Fi, which I can't because my laptop is over there, but if I would do that, this will still continue to function. Why we do this is because A, we want to protect the safety of the users. So all the personal information stay on the device. We don't record faces, we don't take images of the faces. Everything is destroyed in a millisecond. We work with children as well. We have a math tutorial to help children to speed up on math. And this has also been supported by governments in the UK and France. We are very clear about ethics and trustworthy AI. We are totally scalable because once you recorded a video tutorial with actors, oh, by the way, we don't use avatars for two main reasons. The first is because we believe in humanizing AI and not in creating 3D images and generative images for AI. And second is because it would work only on very powerful computers, because to create a 3D avatar, you need a powerful computer. Our solution works on any device. We tested it in schools, we tested it in unemployment centers with Chromebooks, with cheap Chromebooks. It's very important as well that it works on a browser, because the latency is very similar to a human being. What I mean by that is that the time that I see your face and my brain understands what you're trying to say, it's 25 milliseconds in a human being. Our AI does it in 30 milliseconds. If it would be on a server, it would take 120 milliseconds, which would obviously not be useful for the usage we make. It will have a latency that doesn't make sense with what we're doing. And we also are very conscious about carbon footprint. Because our AI works on the device and not on a server, if we have millions of people connecting to working with our AI, it wouldn't be on a server, it wouldn't consume energy. It would just consume the energy of each device that it connects. So that also is very important for a carbon footprint. Finally, what I would like to say is that we use our adaptive media format. You just see here the AI part of it, because this is about AI, but we have also an interactive video player that goes with this. But we use it for social impact. So we use it, like Bill Gates said, in a narrow way. So we want to use it for a specific purpose. So in this case, the purpose is to help people like Stella, that's her name, to get better, to gain self-confidence again. And she can train whatever she wants at her place without being judged. So this is also very important. So we are really in that spectrum to use it in a very narrow way, not a general way. We don't want to take jobs away. We want to help actually people, in this case, to find a job and to get better at what they do.
Well, thank you for the demonstration. I'm sure people have questions about it. But let me turn, Tero, to you. You're the co-founder and executive chair of Silo AI. Talk to me a bit about how AI is being adopted into companies, and are we seeing that at a large scale yet in terms of generative AI?
Thank you, very good. So just as a background, Silo AI is we are a 5-year-old company, 250 people, one of the largest AI labs in Europe with most of the people with PhDs, and we are building solutions for customers. We are kind of AI R&D partner, whether it is for Philips, Allianz, Rolls-Royce, etc. So major corporations, and in that sense, we have seen how AI has been adopted in so far, and I think the question has been up to this point is that how to get AI into scale. It's not about one use case like you build a predictive maintenance, but it's about how you adapt AI in large scales into companies, and that requires infrastructure changes, how do you adapt people, etc. But now we are facing a much larger revolution. Actually, I'm writing also a book on this AI revolution, the handbook, but with generative AI, and I think there are, in order to understand that how it will penetrate and adopted by companies, we need to understand a bit of the how generative AI is built. We have what Thomas was showing, the foundation models. Like behind ChatGPT, there is a GPT-4. Behind there, this fantastic DALL-E, which generates from text prompt to image. There is a foundation model that has been trained with, in this case, with the billions of pictures. ChatGPT's GPT-4 has been trained with the billions of text pieces from the net. So in that sense, the first question is that who is building foundation models? Unfortunately, Europe is not in the forefront of this so far. We have only one major model, which is, or actually two maybe. One is with the Stability AI, text to image sort of the model. And then we have a Bloom that is open source text model. So we need to make sure that Europe is also stepping up in developing this technology, because referring to the previous panel, why does Taiwan produce 70% of the world's semiconductors today, and we have a problem in Europe? It's because the investments went there. So now the investments are going mainly to China and mainly to US, so we need to step up on the models. But then in order to use this model, you need to fine-tune for a specific purposes, so you need tools, so that's the next layer. We are in Silo AI also building tools for companies. And then there are applications that we are seeing happening in the accelerating speeds, whether it is emotion AI applied, generative AI, whether it is coding, where we are getting tools that will, applications that will help coders to actually do not code, but build applications with these tools. And these applications, I think, are really critical because, for example, in coding, if the projection is that in the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 75% of the current coding work will actually disappear. What does it mean for companies? What should you do today to start actually to prepare for that revolution? Because these tools are widely available and there are more coming every day. So at least make sure that in your company, we should not denying our employees the use of these tools, but we should embrace them and make sure that we start to test them. So in that sense, there are like 3 layers here. Is the foundation models, huge technology. There, the regulatory side, I think it's very critical that we are exposed and we have the transparency that what is the data used to train these models. We don't have any visibility into GPT-4, what data is being used. Was it legit, was it not? Because the foundation model is the basis and it will actually determine if you think about you build an application on top of the foundation model like GPT-4, the foundation model will determine your language, your worldview, and your attitudes. So in that sense, it's really saying that these AI foundation models will also determine how we view our culture. And if the US and China are leading currently, we need to make sure that we step up, but also on the regulatory side to make sure that we get transparent, open foundation models. And then the use on the application side, I think it's very critical for companies to start experimenting, building, and we are seeing that this is happening, but I think it's important we actually accelerate also there.
Eva, I know you've got specific points you want to make, but talk to me a bit about the ethics. I mean, it sounds like we need it at the absolute base level. I mean, it's not so much that there's ethical data sets, but we can have good data sets, we can have diverse data sets, we can have clean data. So, I mean, how do you embed ethics from the very beginning, and how do we go about that? And how important is that?
Well, it is very important. And this is, I think, where we come from. One of the areas where Europe comes from with its legislation, actually. We want to develop ethical and trustworthy AI. In fact, the way the AI Act is looked through in the European Parliament, it's one of the main committees that it is, and it's the LIBE committee, so that's the Civil Liberties Committee and the Internal Market Committee. Many might say, well, we need to speak more about competitiveness. So the committee I sit in on industry and innovation has its stake and its head in the game, but the main committee that is leading comes from, the point of view that we need to make sure that those data sets are unbiased, and we have put certain provisions to try and enable that in the AI Act, but also to diversify the risk and not to have the same obligations depending on the type of AI one is developing. So this is key from a European perspective. Of course, some say, well, it brings extra, obligations to companies, specifically smaller players. It makes it more difficult to develop AI, particularly because that point was made that we are not the most advanced when it comes to the availability of data that's out there. But at least we want to make sure that the data that is used is ethical, it's unbiased, it's trustworthy, in order for us to make that basic point out there, the type of AI we would like to see developed in the world. By doing so, I think, and I can maybe elegantly bring my second point here, I think, we need to make sure that we have the AI Act, but we also have a number of other digital-related legislation. I like to refer to all the files that are out there as a digital jigsaw, and I think from a legal coherence and certainty, they all need to make some sort of sense. We see, and we've been discussing points today, like deep fakes or disinformation that could easily fall under the DSA with a specific provision when it comes to images or text or things generated by AI. One could say that certain legislators, certain regulatory bodies already banned for a certain period of time ChatGPT because of data concerns. So they looked in the way GDPR was used. So we already have either legislation that we've approved and it's about to be enacted, other legislation that we are currently working on, third legislation that's been already there, maybe not enforced or has to be better enforced, and we have numerous code of conducts on the table. So I think we need to make sense of it. It needs to have legal certainty, it needs to have coherence, and those voluntary measures like the AI Pact that was announced, like the code of conducts, are welcome, they are needed, but again, there has to be a coherence if we are to make the important points for Europe on trustworthy and ethical AI, but also if we would like to ensure that innovation can still happen.
Well, that's a very neat segue to what I want to ask Gabriele about in terms of Commission interaction with the other stakeholders, specifically industry, because as often happens when there's a new act proposed, we have people throw their hands in the air and say this is going to stifle innovation, this is going to break the internet, which was what they said about GDPR. Last time I noticed, the internet is still working. How do you bring in all those concerns while still maintaining this kind of European sort of softly approach?
Thanks for the question. I mean, indeed, this act is no different from any other proposal the Commission has made. So it's the result of a long process. So I have to say it's actually started back in 2018 so the Commission has always been working on AI, I have to say, but more on the financing aspects. It was since 2018, it was already before this current commission that the commission started thinking more about the policy implications. And that was at the time that the first communication on AI was adopted, AI for Europe. And that communication launched the high-level expert group, which some of you may have heard about, which was an expert group advising the commission about 2 years. And they came up with 2 main documents. One of them was the ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI, which actually was a very important document which helped us in really also drafting the AI Act. And then after the von der Leyen Commission came into office, as you may know, the AI Act, the legislation on AI was a specific commitment by Ms. von der Leyen. We adopted first a white paper. So the white paper also gave an opportunity for a very wide consultation among stakeholders and all sorts of civil society participation. And then only after that we came up with the actual AI Act, which then was also subject to consultation. So, and I think the Act in that sense was not different from other legislation, but I would say the gestation of the AI Act was certainly also quite long. And another point indeed that I want to underline, I think, as Eva mentioned, indeed, the Commission had in mind since the beginning the fact that it's true, the Act is the first legislation in the world, at least to our knowledge, that is bringing forward legislation on AI, but it's not going to be, and it's not at the time being, the only legislation applicable to AI. So exactly because we have other pieces of legislation that have already been adopted that are perfectly operational in the digital field. I mean, GDPR is certainly one, but also the DSA, as you mentioned. So, and these were considerations that we find since the beginning, because we want to make sure that indeed we are not overburdening industry and economic actors.
I'm conscious of time, Thomas, so let's park the AI Act for the moment and talk about practical implications, particularly for the creative industries and for employment. Give me a bit of your perspective on people's legitimate fears, but also what might be the big opportunities as well.
For AI in general?
Generative AI in particular.
Let's put ChatGPT aside for a second. For me, that's still just a technology demonstration. It's almost a little bit of a toy. I think the biggest one is more in applied AI in general. If you really look at the purpose of AI at the moment for the next couple of years, I think it's the mid-size market for industrial use cases. Increase of manufacturing efficiency, supply chain control. I mentioned it earlier, marketing campaigns, measuring it more in regards to the return on the investments. Exactly. My biggest one, my favorite one is healthcare, absolutely. We will be stunned in the next 5 to 10 years. The kind of innovation that we are going to see enabled by AI, either from scratch or whatever is there today, and it will be exponentially enhanced by the adoption of AI. It's from biotechnology, nanotechnology. I mean, we at certain other podium discussions, there's always the examples. If we go to a doctor or we go to a hospital and it's about the X-rays and the MRIs and the accuracy, early adoption of cancer and things like that, I think it will absolutely affect our life to the positive in general. Yes, I will agree on all the acts and stuff that needs to be discussed, no question. Sometimes I come across in these kind of conversation a little bit too, let's say, controversial, but it's only because we should not ignore the fact that this is all about innovation and enablement and productization of the technology itself. And unfortunately, and I see a huge change in Europe, and I love it for the last 2 years, is we have to look in the mirror as a European, and we have to admit that in 30 years, there has been 3 big, massive technology developments. The first one was in the mid-90s with the internet itself. Then came social media, and then came the big cloud service providers. This is number 4. In the first 3, I cannot name a single European, or in this case, German company, who has built a global brand and established it. They're either in China or they're in the United States. The Googles, the Metas, and whatever. At the moment, we talk a lot about large language models. Who is creating them? It's only the same big players, because the cost involved, the resources involved, the compute power involved, the data sets, the scale. At the moment, we are completely lagging behind yet again. There's another conversation that takes too much time, and it's about, are these large language models the answer to everything? What about open source models? What about the smaller models rather than just the big ones? There's so much discussions to be made. Again, I am in absolute favor of the AI Act and everything around it, but let's focus on innovation and the opportunities and not just, the regulations and toning it down.
Tero, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, first point is that I don't think ChatGPT is a toy. It's a very smart service and technology that is already being used in a very creative way. And I think it's also related to regulation. It's also set up very smartly, because if you have a paid version of the ChatGPT, you can either keep your conversation, so you have an archive, but then if you do that, then ChatGPT, OpenAI can actually use your data for training of the models. So AI is so powerful because it's a learning system, and they are very smartly leveraging this one. If you put your data sharing off, then you cannot retain your history. So in that sense, they are acting very smart and gaining lead. And I think, why is this important? Google is the world's dominant search company, and they are because they are all the time learning from the new searches. OpenAI is learning all the time from the new data that goes into the system. So we don't want the future where there's only one text model, which is GPT-4 or GPT-5. So that's why I agree with Thomas. We need to also invest in Europe. We are building actually in Finland, financed by Commission and governments, is Europe's most powerful supercomputer, Lumi. It can train large language models and also other foundation models, and we are doing that as we speak, because Europe needs to step up in the foundation models, building the technology, but also we need to adapt these technologies faster, because in the creative side, we will have a huge impact in the marketing. It's already today possible to automate your marketing chains with the automated agents based on the generative AI. We are going to see, as I already mentioned, coding completely transformed with this one. Education, we should not deny our students access to these technologies, but we should actually embrace them, because they need to learn the art of queries, the questions, that how you steer generative models to generate creative works, and this way you actually are working together with the machine. So partly, yes, they are getting replaced, but only those who will learn to use them will survive. So I think there is so much more we can do. And on the regulatory side, I think I'll leave it just with one point, is that if we can ensure that the foundation models are transparent, ethical, and legislation can help to ensure this point, I think we will be better off. Thank you.
Yeah.
Claudio, I'm going to ask you to give the final remark. But if you could address, what would be your advice for either a young person or an older person who wants to reskill? Where are the opportunities? What would you like to see generations of young entrepreneurs now doing to lead us to the utopia that we want to see? Is it go out and learn about all the AI Act because there's going to be a lot of compliance work? Is it learn or not learn how to code? What is it that you think the gaps are going to be? And look into your crystal ball and tell us what we should do to make a success of this.
Well, that's a complex question, and it needs a lot of time to answer. But according to my experience and with what I'm doing with the team, what we are doing, and the tests we do in schools, and also with unemployed people, with job seekers, in that sense, we realize that the way we can use emotion AI with generative AI combined is very powerful. I just give you an example. I was giving it to you before. If you just use a ChatGPT model and you generate text without the context, without cultural intelligence, then it doesn't resonate in the right way, because there is a barrier. We think that what we saw is that for a young generation, what is very important is to embrace it, understand the usage of it, but also understand the limits of it. And for maturing and for being better at what you do, for reskilling, for example, one factor that came across everywhere in schools, job seekers, new job, reskilling is self-confidence. I think that the self-confidence is one of the major issues when you try to learn something, when you try to become someone else, when you try to grow. And this is what we try to solve with Emotion AI combined with Generative AI. That's what we try to do. So I would leave it with human, really, at the end of the day. I think we need to remember that we are human, and self-confidence is probably the most important thing when you are trying to become an adult or to grow.
Well, thank you very much. I wish we had another hour for this panel because there's so much we didn't get the chance to talk on.